Okay, yeah, I'm going to try and progressively get in a direction of concentration here. Kind of, have quite a bit that I've been kind of thinking about as far as direction is seem to be my focus like right now. And what I mean by focus is my attention in a way that seems to be a considerable amount of, quite a bit that I've put a lot of time into. So, it's kind of like thinking about a little bit uh, deal about family structure or what family law might suggest as a little bit about, the way I see, something about I think about the proper English grammatical composition in a way of like in-law. And it's kind of like really, an in-law normally is, the accusation or definition of, not really involved with the family truthfully at all. And it's almost like, the deal about family structure, almost, if not the option of like, claiming that everyone's an orphan in a way of like, the fact of what an in-law truthfully is to not being involved with the family. It's almost like a patent is not a copyright, or why Bitcoin is not cryptocurrency, or why the Fifth Amendment is not a non-profit organization, and I mean the list goes on and on. What seems to give the appearance of what would be the thought of associated or having. I mean, just normal daily shopping and what's in the home, and in that way, likewise, in addition, just a normal standard day for like many, and what that is, and I was kind of thinking about something about the IRA, and I've kind of like thought about it for a little bit about the IRA and the RISA, and something maybe possibly, I'm just not like thinking about. I mean, like right now about the IRA on the tax form and the RISA statute, predominantly color coded. The Vernon State of Texas statutes annotated. And I'm assuming, and I'm really not going to assume, but I'm almost, since, the Vernon State of Texas statutes annotated is a black book, that I'm practically assuming that all state statutes annotated is about that, okay? This is the color code is, and how true it is about the constitutional law being the black book as well, or, I mean, if that specifically only targets what ratifying and codifying means, to what might be, something about, of not necessarily, so prehistoric that it diminishes the value of what that might only seem to be as a factor of and I'll think about it here in a little bit. Yeah, um, adolescence. Yeah, not so prehistoric that it rules out adolescence. I think about the in-law deal about the thing about that and that alone of adolescence as compared to prehistoric. What that is to an in-law. I mean, for real. I mean, in that way, with an in-law claiming not to have had anything to do with the family, is the thing about it. Okay, and yet it's like everyone's an orphan. And what an adolescent might mean as maybe third person as a proper English grammatical composition, or whether significance is only maybe acknowledging the fact or awareness of maybe what that is or is not, to even maybe the first and second, third person in proper English grammatical composition. But the thing of it is kind of like thinking that an in-law, I mean, it's like a known fact that there's not necessarily the thought or perception or awareness, anything other than the in-law, you know, um, hasn't had anything to do with the family. And what that really is to, my thought about everyone being an orphan in a way. And it's kind of like almost like a deal about what that is sometimes, that even the IRA and the ERISA statute, or, really what seems to be the issue, if the IRA is considered itemization in a way, or, if it's really the issue of like not being used or identified on what is normally identified as a person, and not that it deletes the fact of like maybe a 1099 for what would be normally a business owner, not necessarily the thought about an employer tax ID as compared to an employer or a business owner, or what that might even suggest to the in-law claiming not to have anything to do with the family, but likewise any association in that way would only representative of an orphan, or what adolescence is to an orphan in a way. Yeah, I mean, it seems not really ridiculous, but it's like prehistoric in a way, of, like even the U.S. dollar and what the, BC, DC is to Washington, DC, or, the AD thing. Yeah, I mean, it's like, obviously, the thing about during Christ, or what that is to, before Christ, during Christ, or, or what the deal is why isn't it after Christ? I mean, if it's ultimately getting to, what would be normally, the thought of, not necessarily after death. I mean, normally it would be like before Christ, during Christ, and after Christ. But if Christ is really still the deal about the, religion and being the during instead of after, that would obviously be something that would be maybe a little bit different, maybe, at the level that I've been referring to involving the separation between church and state, at the level, going through the circuit that would be, identified, going through categorization, like itemized characterization of itemization in a circuit that way. Yeah, and my thought about the what power is to, like even atmospheric rectification as compared to what a capacitor might even represent. That way is a constant being some regulating factor of, direct circuit. Likewise, even, my thought about rectification, it seems to be even involving like a atmospheric dissipation of an overabundant amount of electrical, and what that is in direct circuit of electronics as compared to like electrical. But, getting back to the in-law deal, I mean, if it's ultimately, some uh, thing about conversion, or what family law is structured in a way of what an in-law might even represent, in a way of like a dissipation or rectification of an overabundant amount, or maybe generating the thought of knowing it's like an overabundant amount, like a reserve is, in the way of like categorization, or having the right to assemble, in the freedom of speech and the freedom, the press, or, my thing that I think about a considerable amount is, normally about the freedom of speech and the freedom of press, and the way what, like once again, it seems to be the deal about either knowing or not knowing what auditing legal media and deposition is, and, what are the requirements to, I mean, really be the reality, of, the deal of television, or, internet, YouTube, or, satellite TV, or, I mean, maybe even beyond what would be maybe thought of, what's led to be believed in the attorney's office, or, even knowing maybe, what building a particular attorney is in, if it represents, a high-rise tower of power of international law, or, some idea of an office that might give the impression of the same at a different location, or, really, I mean, or if that really is the deal about the in-law, never claimed that, to have anything to do with the family, and everyone's an orphan, and what that is to maybe what an audience might only be thought of as something as a categorization under business and corporate law, ultimately getting to the Social Security Administration in a way, whether if that's the thought of, retirement, whether even a right to assemble would only suggest knowing or not knowing what monetary, domestic, and gross national product is in aggregates, or even knowing, a categorization, whether a degree level would even present the issue of what only opportunity might normally be perceived as, to what would be normally, the deal about degree to non-degree issue, even if classified as, that would normally even predominantly suggest that, predominantly in certain sections identified, that would be a lot of employee or general employment, or in a way of the word employment to begin with, because normally most people might not see the thought that, like I do, it's kind of like hard for me to believe really now that education is even a word beyond, a bachelor's degree. I mean, even hearing it on a university might be, the lucky, introduction of like maybe, the first, 2 years maybe, and if me thinking that maybe even hearing the word, education beyond the freshman year at a major university with a minimum, like requirement of a 4-year bachelor, whatever direction. I mean, it's almost like, it gets back to, is it the topic or the subject, or still a method of banking, and that's the deal about it. And I talked to a bank, Wells Fargo, as a matter of fact, and the Social Security about, something about their phone number, 1-800-772-1213. And you know what sequencing the characterization is in programming, with only, using two numbers like 1, 2, and 13 being 25. Normally, that would be the 25th letter of the alphabet, or the alphanumerics of like area, like that's an automatic, thing about the area, like having a right to assemble. I mean, whether anyone's in control of it or whether it was chosen or meant and designated to be used that way. I mean, it seems to still be the category below business and corporate law that way. Or, the thought of like, ultimately it leads to like retirement. And the deal about the IRA and the ERISA statute has, just been, the last several, really not the ERISA, based upon, alphanumerics of 52 and the VPN that I've been thinking quite a bit about, given the acronym of like a vice president network or, the thought about, I'm not real thrilled. I mean, if it leads to the virtual personal network, I mean, to me, I kind of mentioned because I called the inspector general in Washington, D.C., it's kind of like, hey, is like anyone really ever going to answer their phone? I mean, it's like, I mean, you got to be kidding me. So, it seems to be like a lot of voicemail with numbers that only seem to be whether or not if, a storage media file would represent maybe not necessarily an archive or, what, auditing legal media and deposition really is to teleprompting or transcript would be, actually the word in court as minutes in a way, or as far as like legal terminology, I mean, transcripts or teleprompting would be one way or the other, either reading it or the actual content in progress, like available in closed caption for the hearing impaired, and how that in itself, teleprompting based upon audible sound being recognized as that and translated into like available in closed caption for the hearing impaired. Live in a way of what auditing legal media deposition really is to what only might present maybe the thought of like ultimately transcript and what transcript is to like paper or everything about microfiche and some of the oldest ways of like storage file and like courts of like documents in the form of microfiche. I mean, it's like the black deal of film, not necessarily a PDF file, but what would obviously be a chronological order of if there any modification of microfiche now, or even if it still exists. I mean, I'm really not sure, other than previously looking for information that way, that was available in several different different type of, if you want to call it, degree levels, or or if anyone like really would even know what a degree level is at any level. I mean, all the way up to the United States Supreme Court for real. I mean, ultimately, it seems to be whether or not if that's going to be ultimately a decision of an equator, ultimately getting to the operator and what the separation of church and degree level only means, to whether or not if it's a degree, non-degreed, or what opportunity only means in the form of maybe the non-degreed employer, or the thought of whether it's a topic or subject, or the pronoun issue of that fact, or what the deal is about that in that way. So anyway, so I was thinking about that IRA, and normally it's identified on tax forms that way. And if it's not identified, I mean, is it just open for opportunity? I mean, it is paper, or is it just really the deal about isometrics, or daily standard transaction at the bank as a known fact? Or the deal about even the Social Security Administration ultimately getting to now the SSI, supplemental security of a direct deposit straight from the United States Treasury, normally identified as a SUP, U.S. Treasury SUP 310 as a direct deposit, a direct I think it's SUP Treasury 310, SSI 310, Anyway, so anyway, the deal about it seemed to be whether or not if any banking system is using the Social Security's phone number of like 1-800-772-1213, and 16 characterization in sets of 4, only using 2 numbers, like programming and like using binary numbers with either 0 and 1, and those are the only 2. And like the 1, 2, and 1, 3 being the 25, ultimately getting to the 25th letter, and the alphanumerics of 25, and like area, and what that is ultimately spelled out to like the pronunciation Y to WHY to 56, ultimately getting to paper being 56, and ultimately the paper made thing, and what the real deal is about world class. I mean, in JD Power that way. I mean, it ultimately seems to be like whether or not if like the Social Security Administration is focusing on the deal of SSI and the acronym, or really what the real deal is about the experience. That seems to be, like right now, uh, been going on for, more than a decade, now the year 2023. And the thing with this is that it seems to be that the IRA and the ERISA statute, and I'm just like really thinking about whether or not if the IRA is just only suggesting, the difference of, the alphabet and the ERISA being the SE, and how the Apple iPhone SE is really, the real deal about, the big deal about the year of like, the release and distribution of, the Apple iPhone SE, the year 2020, and what that is to the front lines of the beachfront. I mean, it ultimately gets to the seashell. I mean, for real, it seems to be, the deal about the SE being 24, or the whole homeowners association, or GMAC, or the IEE, the International Electronic Engineering, the 24, and it really seems to be, quite a bit about something about that and in that way. And so I was like thinking about all that 24 stuff, and what a fixture in real estate means to venue as compared to maybe not identified, still like the accusation that, hey, you already know, and it's like, in the home. I mean, ultimately it seems to be like, even information as a commercial, like GMC saying raising a bar, GMC is like raising a bar, it's the I-beam thing, okay? But the thing with this is that, Sarbanes, and honestly, the deal about Sarbanes, the way it's like the bars, okay? The Sarbs, the bars, and, the Sarbanes, the Ains, and the M is in, and Ames is kind of like almost like the Air Force thing about being airborne. My thing about, beyond maritime law of liquidable equity, of interest-bearing accountability, beyond the front lines of the beachfront of international financial management that way, and color code of the beach of sand software, and storage area networks, or what that is, beyond at a degree level, like securities and annuities network that way. And, I was kind of like looking at all that, and I was like looking at quite a bit about that because, it seems to be, the international financial management is like, like the biggest borrower's terminology, thing of like, sand software. I mean, it seems to be the only deal about degree level, whether or not if the degree is only, participating at a circuit or the degree level itself in that way, being securities and annuities, and what that is to an international law firm as compared to maybe what might only be the thought and perception of only programming on television, on K television, or what degree level is in programming, involving maybe what an operator only means of, Vantage Love 30, or the secret de facto deal about it, or, what that is to Oracle Corporation and middleware specifically, even if the computer architecture platform and embedding encryption, and really what that is to the equator, the operator, and separation between church and state. I mean, just with the phone number, I mean, it's like everything I'm focusing on is kind of like, it's not really the process of elimination, or like, what is there left on the entire planet to talk about. But I mean, it seems to be, just really what's going on in my life right now. And ultimately, it really gets to like the biggest issue, like, really entertainment law, because obviously, WEA International is like 181 Houston, Texas. And what that is to television, sometimes it's kind of like where is Warner, Electra, and Atlantic, in a way it's like WEA, as an acronym, it's kind of like, really, where are you, for real. And at the same time, it's kind of like, who's who, and for real, and what's the deal about the Equator in a way, like the degree level, and what that is to entertainment, and I thought kind of really, based upon, conveyance and distribution is a phrase that I use in a way, and what that is to maybe what WEA International is three different levels in my mind that would even be representative of the Mormon Church, and there's like three deals about the celestial and telestial, and there's like one more I'll have to think about later. But anyway, there's like the deal about celestial and telestial, and what that is to the mystical clause and direct circuitry of Washington D.C., or the alphanumeric 130 in Washington, or television and electronic God. In the D.C. being like a dimensional clause, and what that is to international law as having fair use to, and what access easement is involving entertainment law, involving royalties, or what fair use really is to intellectual property in that way of like compact disc or motion picture like DVDs, or what that really is. And a method of banking, obviously it's in my mind at a degree level, it involves isometric beyond just a transaction at the bank, at the level, the 12 Federal Reserve banks, and the United States codes annotated. I mean, it seems to be the only two real big deal about the operating the Equator and what Zion is to the 1,000 years of peace, and the HTTP colon of 64, operator being 0, being 64, and operator itself being 108, and bicentennial, and what that bicentennial quarter is, even to Chevrolet, and other factors, of 108, and it seems to go on and on a little bit about, what the deal is about the bicentennial quarter. And, my thing about it, it really seems to be, ultimately, it had got to, I've been, like, really, thinking quite a bit. I mean, it seems to be, like, right now, the only two that seems to be, like, the real big deal about, the pi r squared and practical application of principle and integration and compatibility in every possible way of alphanumeric and linguistics and analytical and normally when it's on an analytical level, I mean, it's not automatically associated by what would be only termed as an alphanumeric connection. But when it gets analytical, the words are different. The alphanumerics doesn't really always mean anything other than analytical in a whole different direction. That would almost represent maybe what a sole proprietor might mean in space exploration, a silent partnership or a color code that way, or what that is to NASA, or I mean, for real, even Dodge and 35 for what Austin is to the state capital, or even the United States Capitol in Washington D.C. And ultimately, the Social Security gives information that if there's like any issue to call the Inspector General. Well, my thing about calling them was the first thing. I mean, why aren't you answering your phone? I mean, like, I know it's Sunday, but I mean, really at this point, I mean, it hadn't been the first time, like during business week, every day, and continually getting the voicemail and having to leave a voicemail. But anyway, I mean, it's like, been going on quite a bit, and more so than I find, the issue of like whether it's the thought of, really my toilet's not an amusement park, but, I mean, for real. But anyway, yeah, so, in any case, yeah, so I was kind of like thinking about, that, as well as the high-O silver, and what that, once again, the high-O silver, the thing about the stainless steel toilet and what that is to, where the stainless steel involving, one of the oldest governmental mainframes, and it being the Whopper, okay, and what that is, obviously to the imperial legal that way, or the Blue Bonnet, and I can't believe it's butter, and, and Austin Powers. Austin being 84 or embassy, or what the real deal is about whether or not if human capital is only the issue of like isometrics of actual participation, which originally got it to where it's at as a method of banking, or what that is in the European issue of the Eurodollar, or what that is to the dollar itself, and ultimately getting to the 1,000 years of peace in Zion, which has the connectivity of the Mediterranean, and way of like Club Med and all that stuff about the bicentennial and the operator, in that way of what Israel is to 64, or the Mediterranean, and the Eurodollar, having that connectivity of ultimately, whether or not if the Equator is going to be the issue of what the Caribbean is to, I mean, the Garden of Eden, and God created woman from a rib of a man, and what that is to, I mean, the FDIC and the U.S. dollar, even the Eurodollar that way, or what the Equator really is, in the book of Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, about the history of the U.S. dollar, and some ideology of whether or not if it's really only legal terminology in Latin, or if that's really the case at all. Somewhere in my mind I see something about Notre Dame. Yeah, in that way. I mean, really, even what that is to a hedge fund, like panning for gold, like Sox and Goldman, it's kind of like a deal, of whether panning for gold is ultimately getting to, why the pyramid on the back side of the U.S. dollar is representing supposedly the biggest mouth of the river, of the Mississippi. The mouth of the river being identified as a delta, and schematically in electronics it's a triangle. And what that is to the U.S. dollar, being a pyramid, or Egypt, the way equating to 73 like Harris in the Houston, Texas area, and what that is, beyond the pi r squared, and the factor of like Deep Star 6, and what that is to night vision, Abraham Lincoln, all the way through the Nixon administration. And ultimately his thing was, in my mind now, when he held up his two fingers with both hands in a V sign. Now some people see his victory during Richard Nixon. It was like the peace thing, like during that era, like on all the channels. Not necessarily that Richard Nixon had to be the one saying, I mean it all. But that was the information during that time. It was the peace thing, and it seemed about like ultimately it's getting to the thermocouple semiconductor, like more from Ork. I mean, for real. And Mork and Mindy and Robin Williams and Pam Dauber, the shot about 9090 getting to the 13-band graphic equalizer of impedance and ambience of the pastel nanoluminance, and that's of night vision that way. And what pastel is being 73. Likewise, Egypt and what the pyramid is to the US dollar and the euro dollar. I mean, that way. Or the code blue, like the Israeli flag, the Star of David, being a code blue, like 6-point star, and the horizontal blue bars above and below, the 6-point star, what we represent normally like 90 degree, like absolute values, all the way going through like algebra and all the tech math and everything going through calculus on into, the quantum deal about, attenuation, beyond, cycles per second and oscillation. I see, only, the real issue of like a spectrum and bandwidth, of like identifying what a spectrum is and a variation of a bandwidth using a spectrum, normally in 13-band graphic equalizers that only, change the pitch and tone of what might be identified as a frequency based upon the spectrum and bandwidth, and how it's measured, in attenuation or processing speed. That affect, the pitch, tone, the highs, mids, and lows that way. But anyway, I mean, it really kind of seems to be like some high-tech stuff about, ultimately getting to 13 being 99 and telepathic, or the TP being 36 and chase, and all that stuff, ultimately leading to, the Statue of Liberty. But anyway, it's kind of like focusing on that IRA thing and the alphanumerics of, 28 or AOL, or really what that is, to an ERISA statute, and it really seems to be like the real big deal of the Apple iPhone SE, and that being SE being 24, and how that seems to have all the deal about the in my mind GMC saying that they're raising the bar, and what that is to the absolute values, or really the commercial being the I-beam, of towers of powers, and likewise, raising the bar seems to be the Sarbanes and Oxley deal about, auditing what that is, Sarbanes and Oxley financial instruments and SOX compliance, and, I mean, quite a bit about it. So I was kind of like thinking about, what that really is to the year 2020, Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs, and kind of, and ultimately it's getting to what Hugh Downs is to oil, or what the SE and pronunciation being yes, and what that is to Texas and Mexico that way, of the Apple iPhone SE, and the difference between the ERISA statute of like Vernon State, Texas statutes annotated, and the IRA on the tax form normally associated with like any employer, and virtually almost the word employee and employer is automatically the deal about the thought of what the Better Business Bureau is or is not, to Vantage Love 30 or secret de facto, and what 30 is, alphanumerically being 100 and a quarter. And what the quarter is to the bicentennial and the operator, and once again back to zero and operator of 108 and a 64 thing, and the separation between church and state of like Zion being 64 and 1,000 years of peace. In my mind, all the way, from like the Abraham Lincoln deal about the hood ornament, Lincoln Continental, and that rectangle, and what the big deal is about the rectangle in that way of, the 90 degree, and ultimately, the experience going through a circuit, whether or not if Abraham Lincoln is only the deal about whether a shadow government is or is not, like night vision, or, what that rectangle means as the President Lincoln being like the president that studied in the dark. Normally, my memory of like, knowing anything about Abraham Lincoln didn't even suggest really shadow government or like a night vision, other than, that he studied in, by candlelight in the dark. Okay, and the thing about it is that Richard Nixon, uses that what some might call the peace sign, but in my mind it's like the exponential quotient, of like the Apple iPhone SE, and what it is to 24, and the HOA Homeowners Association, and the GMAC promissory notes, or the International Electronic Engineering deal about it, being all 24 that way, and what SE and pronunciation, C being yes, of language, also equating to 49 and the Lord. I mean, all the connectivity, and even pro, and what a pronoun is to 64. I think what noun is. I think noun is what 64. That's what 28. What 48, 49. Yeah, 64. So anyway, it's kind of like the pronoun deal about 64 and ACTP :/, and what a pronoun is or is not, it's a 64, or the computer programming language as compared to the Equator. And once again, the separation of the United States codes annotated being the Red Book, and what the deal is about the deal about Hopsing. And it seems to be like really the big deal about whether it being the deal about Hopsing and Wyatt Earp and John Wayne is ultimately getting to my ass has finally made it to the finish line, or what that is to in the way of like a John Wayne. There's only one way, John Wayne, the John acquaintance. It's like yeah, it's like a first impression on the toilet every single time. It's like an acquaintance, it's kind of like the first impression every time, right? I mean, it will always be the first impression on the toilet, and it's almost like Art Linkletter to Pearly Gates of Heaven, and all the names written in the Book of Life beyond the telekinetic role normally associated with like in the immediate duration of like television between national security, talking about telepathic communication. And normally it's, according to what I've seen on television, normally when references to national security even suggests, and it's like very rare, of telepathic communication or information that might lead, but normally it normally somewhere involves normally a telekinetic thing about suggesting power of the pen rolling on the table. My thing about it seems to be about the pen being a telekinetic thing, or what that is to a hood ornament. Or Peterbilt, or what Peter built is to Peter at the Pearly Gates of Heaven as compared to the streets of gold, or what the hood ornament means to accuracy in the way of like the hood on the Lincoln Continental, what Abraham Lincoln is, in my mind, the accuracy of night vision. Even Richard Nixon, all the way, suggesting that the thermocouple semiconductor would only represent maybe, more from Mork in the one egg deal, and the Shah's about 909, and the way he held his hands, it's kind of like ultimately gets to like a semi. It's the semiconductor, when in fact it's really like a V-twin, and that's exactly what it is. And really, like for a drummer or like a conductor of an orchestra, I mean, it's either one conductor or two conductors that would present the peripheral tolerance of a panoramic academia. Even for a drummer that uses the V-twin figure 8 drumstick twirl, and it gets into the perfect vision of the 9-degree right angles of infinite lines that way, getting into the perfect vision about the zoom lens, as well as like ice skaters in the figure 8, even the drummer doing the V-twin figure 8 drumstick twirl, and all that about the conductor seemed to be really the deal about the financial instruments in the way of like what waveform is within itself, and what that is to not presenting the issue of like a variable, but more so the deal about the itemized, and what that itemized categorization is to only itemized, going through maybe what might be considered an itemized categorization of circuit, and really what that is, above like even business and corporate law, going through the circuit, or what international banking systems mean that way of like aggregates and import and export, or what boycott and embargo really is to raising a bar. What an embargo is when internet protocol or commerce dictates what's on or offshore. I mean, if it's only the issue of even making it beyond international floating council interest bearing accountability, I mean, for real, I mean, it's almost like the entrance exam of tariff being the deal, or the deal of tariff. Likewise, in addition, the deal about whether or not the tariff is going to be the issue of like a protection against what would be maybe presented maybe sometimes as piracy, or the potential of other issues on an international level. The tariff is something really about customs and all that, and something about the protection of entering, it's already protected waters of what was in. How true it is now, if it's still 200, it might be 300. I'm almost, if it's not, I'm almost assuming that it's more than likely going to at some point towards the tricentennial. But anyway, yeah. So in that way, I was kind of like thinking about that as a tariff representative of even the thought of that in that way, or really what the deal is about it. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, it's already going on like 34 minutes and like 40 seconds right now, and I'm going to try and say on that what I was really starting to focus on, how the in-law, I mean, in family law is really set up to the real deal about. I mean, the thought and claim that, hey, the in-law really never had anything to do with the family. I mean, and it still stands true as definition. I mean, for real. I mean, does it really ever change? I mean, or is it really that by definition? And really, I mean, or is it really an option and used that way of what normally not being, involved with the family only means to an orphan? Or, absolutely no parental guidance or presidential governor, or, maybe the thought of even whether or not if a third person of intellectual property would be maybe the designation of no progression, anything other than what it is, as maybe a storage file or intellectual property in the way of royalties, having the same but being used, and what lifespan means to intellectual property, or whether or not if that's normally just the idea of what a daily standard transaction at the bank is, or even the thought of like a Social Security Administration's phone number, like 1-800-772-1213, or the 7 being the power, and the 72 being like the world, the money, and Browndale, or really maybe the onion ring thing, right? But anyway, yeah. So in the thing about COVID ID-19 being like a 72, and the thing of it is, it seems to be like the alphanumerics of all that seems to be the issue of sometimes even a promiscuous color code of a football, and what that is to the thought of a quarterback, and the deal about predominantly the quarterback, obviously the quarter is like 100, and the back being like 17, and the FBI, or what that is, back being what, 17, and it's ultimately like the quarterback is almost like the deal about history, yet executive of current event, or what relation is of like computer architecture and platform. I mean, the word is relation, and it really ultimately gets to the pronunciation and spelling of using the RA or the RE, the difference of 90 and 94. And the thing about the semi and the thermocouple semiconductor seems to be like the big deal of the thought of what semi is to cemetery or memorial. And 90, my thing really about semi is really about drummers and conductors of orchestration of panoramic academia. Although Brazoria, Pearland, Texas, south of Houston, Texas, Brazoria's like 90, okay? But my thing about really, my thought of a cemetery, although that is alphanumeric stuff, but Brazoria being 90, my thing truthfully about it is about the 90-degree right angle, and the infinite lines ultimately getting to the perfect vision. And really, anything really before 1992 was really not even really having a need to think that way, but really since June, let's just say the Saturday SAT thing in my mind of the baptism of like June 14th, 1992. I mean, at this point, really, I mean, it seems to be like ultimately, the same sort of characterization of maybe my thought of what written is to governor, or the alphanumerics 109, or ultimately getting to even my thought of like a Los Angeles being 109, or the area code 213 in that way, and Los Angeles, or alphanumerics of like governor's president 109 is 110 being 247, and like a Robert E. Rubin quarter, in the way of like 109 is Los Angeles, yet the area code is 213. Like instead of 109 is 110, it's 213 is 110. It's like the new area code 323 in Los Angeles area anyway. I mean, still, really, I mean, that's really what it is, and in that way, and some alphanumerics between like New York and certain factors about Houston and Los Angeles. I mean, and the 101 deal getting to the alphanumerics of 213 telepathic brainwaves, and a lot of stuff that I've been focused on about the airborne, beyond the thing in my mind about the beyond the front lines of the beachfront of international law, like maritime law, and what airborne is in that way. I mean, if memorial only seems to be whether or not if it's suggesting a cemetery, or an individual, or sole proprietor, or a business law, what a silent partner is to a sole proprietor. I mean, if it is a known or not known fact, or what that is to why a patent is not a copyright, and what a trademark might only suggest. I mean, if the real deal is only the issue between something of whether or not if a breach is only suggesting a copyright possibly being a breach, or possibly not at all. My thought about what a copyright might only suggest, is anything deviant other than, its original source. I mean, my thought about whether, if it's live, don't be fooled by imitation thing, or, just like a musician that taught themselves by listening to others, and practice, what would be, in my mind, the perfection, not really deviating, I mean, from, the original source. That's normally the one getting the royalties of intellectual property. In any case, that's my thought about it. I mean, I know what I think and what I've known copyright law to be normally taught as being, but, really in reality, I mean, if it's only getting to the real deal again about, what degree level is and what only opportunity means as compared to, the word relation between the thing about the computer architecture platform and the Equator. I mean, it seems to be the big deal whether or not if embedding and encryption is only really the issue of an Equator and operator, or the separation between church and state. In my mind, automatically the deal of night vision. Now, I mean, I've looked and searched in so many different ways, and virtually every way, and what that is to, my direction. I mean, what I'm talking about now and have been, like on YouTube, I mean, it's so not limited to what I've been really talking to, but, anything other than what you see is really, not what I'm talking about, okay? But in any case, so I mean, my thought about what the IRA is to the ERISA statute right now, and like I'd mentioned, like the band REO Speedwagon, and it was kind of like looking at the, and the reason why I'm thinking of REO Speedwagon is because it's like the song "Keep on Loving You" once again, and the all coiled up and hissing part about it, okay? Because I've been looking at UTVs, and I have a few of them, okay, and like ATVs and scooters and stuff like that. And I'm looking at another one, and when I saw that Hisun Axis HO high output 700 Axis 700 high output UTV. I mean, when I saw the Hisun, and I was kind of like, how's that pronounced? And I was thinking hissing. I mean, it's like almost immediate thought of like RL Speedwagon all coiled up and hissing. And it's so like really not funny because it seemed to be like the one UTV that like gets up, I think it's to like I think it's 60 or 70 miles per hour as compared to some of the others. I'm not even sure if it gets up to 80. I'm really not sure, but I think it was like way more than I thought. And when I saw that Hisun hissing thing and thinking of that REO Speedway, it's like, yeah, that's got to be it. And automatically the axis is like I thought of like Audi and the three intersecting axes, ultimately getting whether vectors and rasters are going to be any issue like defining what the oval shape of spherical quadrants would only suggest in that way. So anyway. So it's like an Audi automatically in that way. And the Pat Robertson deal about the 700 Club, and even Rush Limbaugh and the OK and the A America thing. It seemed to be like it's altogether in the Oral Roberts of the OK of like, Rush Limbaugh referring to the OK A America thing, like he was like really done, I mean, all the time on his talk show as compared to something about his radio station. But anyway, it ultimately gets to, the thought of, the Oral Roberts University, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the OK thing, and what that is to, my thought of American DJ, and all coiled up in hissing is about, the seashell in my mind automatically with that UTV and all the connectivity and how the eardrum and the eardrum and the eardrum and is designed, virtually the same almost in structure as the seashell, and the deal about an American DJ using that sound effect. The tube, I mean, I've heard it referred to as a tube. And I had really no idea that a seashell was even involved with it when I first heard about, something about the tube effect. And like I mentioned earlier, it was like an older generation, throwing the information of like the tube effect. It was like a high school thing coming from an older generation, and in my mind, automatically a California thing. So I mean, that was my first thought when I realized the seashell was involved, and even more so when I heard like live DJ in that way talking, kind of like the Radar Love thing, yeah. For anyway, so I mean, I was being talked to like that, and I heard that effect, and it's kind of like automatically, after certain factors, kind of like the tube effect, yeah. So I mean, it has a seashell effect, okay. And anyway, it's like it's real intense. Well, anyway, it's kind of like something about that, and the REO Speedwagon with the hissing thing and the coiled up and hissing. And when I realized, I mean, that sounds like the hissing of a seashell and you know, the way it's tilted and the way it sounds with the hissing sound of like the waves and everything. It kind of has that hissing sound. I mean, yeah, for real. So all those thoughts were like going on in my mind, okay, because I'm looking at this anyway, and it's just like, you know, something I'm thinking about. It seems to be like, you know, really like a big deal automatically about the beachfront, or you know, the Apple iPhone SE and the IRA and the ERISA statute, okay. But anyway, I'm going to have to think about something about that because you know, like I said, the deal about the word volume. I mean, I'd been in the law library for years. You know, even after studying to be a paralegal, and it was only a 6-month course. But I mean, you know, my thing was like, you know, after about 4.5 months, I mean, I'd completed 9 courses of like law, and it was like on real estate. Okay, when I went to the Art Institute of Houston about television and audio production and music video business. Okay. So like I went like there, okay. But anyway, yeah. So my thing about it is just that yeah. Anyway, it's kind of like the deal about that is that my thought about it was because yeah, the deal about it. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to think about that real quick. What's going on? 45 minutes right here. But anyway, in any case, yeah. So I was thinking about that because of the tube effect and what that is to internet protocol, and you know, surfing the internet, you know, about the wave and the tube of a surfer, and what that is to, you know, international floating accounts and interest-bearing accountability, and or what that is to IP address and internet protocol, or IP or PI, and a pronunciation of, you know, the 3.1416 of, you know, pi r squared, and or the pronunciation being, you know, PIE and 30 spelled out being, you know, all that connectivity between the operator and bicentennial and the quarter and the 64. I mean, it's like all the stuff you're listening to is like, I mean, all the connectivity. It's kind of like what I'm kind of really, you know, directing my attention towards in that way. But anyway, yeah. So I thought I'd mention that because, like I say, it seemed to be like the deal about the in-law involving the IRA and the ERISA statute. What that is in color code, it's like the in-law never claimed to have anything to do with the family, and everyone is an orphan. I mean, it's almost like someone not identifying an IRA on their own tax form, or thinking that they would even use that as a method. You know, I mean, for real, or you know what the deal is about them. You know, why a patent is not copyright, or the freedom of speech and freedom of press that way, or you know, I mean, for real. I mean, not that the issue is the Fifth Amendment. It's not a non-profit organization. I mean, but really, I mean, who's trying to kid who at this point, for real? But anyway, I mean, yeah, for real. I mean, you know, yeah. So anyway, I mean, if ultimately it gets to like whether or not the being above or below, you know, business or corporate law, and what Social Security only presents as an option, it seems to be whether or not if the history of a mailbox is only the issue of a practice, whether a direct deposit is maybe put as maybe a compromise and maybe not known as a method of banking that might not even be aware to the person who's supposedly aware of getting a direct deposit, only to discover that, you know, ongoing issues with a direct deposit set up to be not in any kind of way an overdraft in any kind of way is experiencing something that would only reflect maybe, you know, a method banking of checks and endorsements. In my account, I mean, it's seriously not that. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, just, you know, why am I? I mean, am I supposed to like claim that there's a problem? I mean, for real, you know, or you know what that is, whether or not it's the family law, or like the notice legal tender for all that, both probably like, you know, I mean, is that the Social Security Administration's number for 772, the power of what COVID ID 19, or the 72 in the world, the money is a categorization, and it's like not identified, therefore a direct deposit is questionably, you know, with the 12 and 13 being 25, having the right to assemble in an area and as a categorization. It's kind of like you're having an issue with processing all of a sudden, right? At a degree level, and at a degree level, I'm supposing that's a degreed explanation for exiting what the own discipline like description of participation of, you know, even calling the Social Security or the bank, in my case like the Wells Fargo thing, or what that is, you know, of you know, it's an inaugural, you know, having a boss on thing. You got to be kidding me. You know, or the Hopsing deal, or you know what that means in globalization of international financial management, or you know, so you know, you know, the Inspector General, you know, I'm really wanting to hear what the Inspector General has to say about, you know, whether or not if communication issues only identify what a spectrum is to signal strength, or whether signal strength is only, you know, raising a bar issue of like a spectrum or bandwidth, or a bar within range would only be the issue of the high-O silver thing of like a governmental mainframe. And ultimately the Apple iPhone 6s It's the color of the stainless toilet, okay? I mean, if the high O silver only represents, a color code of like what a stainless toilet is in a governmental, facility, or, a government of like what the oldest mainframe in government is the Whopper, or what high O silver is to, Apple iPhone 6S, um, or what, 6 spelled out being 52, whether or not if it's going to be the ERISA statute being 52, or a VPN, or some idea of like a podcast and as a sole proprietorship, or, a silent partnership, like, releasing any accusation of a vice president network having any participation, or what a silent partnership is in that way, a business and sole proprietorship, or, and what that really is, okay? In any case, yeah. So in any case, yeah. All that great stuff about degree level. Yeah. Well, hey, it's like I've mentioned before. It's like, hey, I'm not going to call the Federal Bureau of Investigation about a crime, but hey, how about all that degree privilege? Okay. I know all that sounds good, right? Yeah. Well, anyway. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So anyway, yeah. So so I suppose it's going to be the thing about. Oh, I suppose you just woke up one morning and decided you're going to be a Christian rock star, right? And all that embedding encryption has led to Fred Flintstone and Life's the Same, I'm moving in stereo. Life's the same except for Fred Flintstone shoes. Yeah, okay, well, great, well, good. Anyway, yeah, so like, hopefully I'll, like, have a little bit more time to put towards my music video. Um, and like really get on into really what I really would be doing, and probably not really talking about this at all in any kind of way. Like, but this is like the year 2023, and it's like, hey, why wouldn't I be? I mean, why wouldn't I be at this point, right? So anyway, yeah, well, there it is. Okay, well, good. Have a good thing about whatever it is you're doing. Okay. Now, anyway, I'll talk to you later. Okay.